I'm going to start with this first question. So what drew you to Martin de Porres as a protagonist and to this particular historical moment?
Yeah.
And you can answer this like as the playwright, as the actor, and then also I want to get your point of view, like what called you to this work?
I did not know about Martine, I would say until maybe like right before the pandemic. Emily Lyon, who we both know,
Yeah.
amazing director, she was at a yard sale and she was like, hey, there's like a statue of this guy. It feels like something you would like. And I'm like, okay, like, give me the statue.
Yeah.
You know, and she gave it to me and I like researched who this guy was, and it was Martin de Porres. And I think during the pandemic, I was very much investigating my heritage, my identity, the man I wanted to be, things I inherited that maybe I wanted to let go or deepen, you know, and one of those things was faith and my connection to my faith. Someone who, my dad was Catholic, my mom took me to Baptist church, so being in between traditions and sometimes seeing people in East New York where I'm from really suffer and struggle and give all they could to an institution that didn't always give back to them in material ways, you know? So when I found the journey of Martine, he was a guy who, despite all the things he inherited, still believed, still had faith, still fought for community, and felt like an ideal that I could both aspire to and also investigate as a writer.
Yeah.
And as a Black, queer, Southern person, I often am drawn to stories of faith and crises of faith. And I think we've worked on this a lot, and I encouraged him at one point, rip it up and do something different. And then this draft feels like it's really on its way to becoming about the things that people will do to get into heaven and what that means.
So in your research, how much of it was like left out of this process, and how much of it was built in, or how much of it was fictionalized? I really do love the language that you're using, you know, like this imaginative language between contemporary and the past, and also incorporating the religious systems that take place, and then even the cultural systems taking place, and the political systems taking place. So I mean, wonderful work, all of that. So can we talk a little bit about like this decision to kind of go back into bondage?
Yeah, in my research, it's mainly the mythology of Martine,
Okay.
right?
Yeah.
This is how maybe the church wants him to be remembered and talked about, and there wasn't a lot of research into the person. You know, what it took for him to get through day to day, living in those circumstances. And in imagining that, I saw all these parallels to today's time, you know what I mean? How maybe for some folks, questioning faith and religion is taboo, right? And for me as, Black and Latino man, is very much like, what is faith giving our community? You know, and how can we champion that? And then what are the systems of maybe capitalism, for example, that maybe have pervaded some of these religious institutions that we can let go?
Right.
You know? So in imagining Martine the man, him having to teach a Bible that was edited and used to enslave people like him also in some ways being a young man of privilege, having a father who was, you know, a conquistador, you know, and put him into rooms and spaces where his brethren were not welcomed. I think that's where I found the sort of like middle ground of the language of like, yeah, we should feel rooted in the Bible, the text, and also how can these people feel like people from today, who are asking the same questions, who felt the same things, and are really, I think, examining how we can let go of the things we've inherited as people, and that can be spiritual, that can be emotional, maybe physical, all of that. How can we actually redeem ourselves? What does redemption even mean in that way? And who tells us we're good or not? And I think particularly now, even in this political moment, I think we're seeing how that is very subjective, depending on, you know, who's the judge and the jury.
Right.
In that way. So I hope that answers the question.
It does, it does. And what's your vision of this?
I think that the question, part of the question that I heard was the decision to go back into bondage.
Yes.
And what I want to say to that is so when we research the man, you don't learn a whole lot about him as a man.
Right.
But what you do learn is that the church loved him because he sold himself back into slavery. And that's what made him a saint during the civil rights movement. So that is real. So that to me is fascinating, considering the ways that the goal line shifts for us in this country in terms of, first there was DEI, but now DEI is a terrible thing, right? And next year it will disappear the way critical race theory disappeared before DEI became the thing, right? So I'm thinking about how, so to me, it's fascinating that this man sold himself into slavery to legitimize his faith for himself. And that to me is an allegory for what we're living through right now. Like, who will do that? Who would do that?
So the theme, so the play mixes comedy, ritual, and the supernatural and religious elements. And what's the tone that you were chasing for people to like when they hear this the first time? Because you're playing with different ones, and there's a lot going on. So what is it? What's going on?
Yeah, I think for me, because religion is such a I would say line in the sand for so many people, how can I make people laugh at religion but also look at the devil as a real person who was flawed, is also a son of God, and if he's also a son of God, is it possible for him to be redeemed as well, right? So I think tonally, it's like the devil in particular, we know, is using comedy as a mask. You got all this stuff going on brewing inside of him. And it's that thing of like, we laugh because it hurts too much to just feel the stuff, and in thinking of our ancestors and how they persevered and how they got through. I know they had to find joy in something and somewhere. Maybe it was in community in that way. So I think for me, I'm deeply interested in continuing to mine like the joy in the play. I think that's, for the next draft in particular, how I can find those moments, because their day-to-day life was so difficult, but something they did have was each other, So I think that's something I'm looking at, where even the devil in his last moments, it's all he knows is, the mask, the persona, he doesn't allow himself to, shed that, and maybe that's why he falls back down at the end of the play. But I think for me, I was interested in like, okay, people are walking in who have very different relationships to faith. How can I make them lean in and be open-minded to a conversation that we're often not taught in church in particular? Like, Does that ring true to you?
Yeah. That's great. My themes, power to heal, is both gift and burden, right? So how did you map all of these emotional costs of power into this like sort of coming of age?
Yeah. I mean, I think I relate to what it is to, you might have a win, you might have some buzz, and then people want to be around you, and they want adjacency to you, and what that is to feel like a prop, an accessory, something that people are that want to solely take from, and not look at as a full person. And in particular, when maybe that shiny luster fades away or doesn't benefit them, then it turns the opposite, So in thinking of Martine, as we talked about, like almost like a celebrity in that way, right? Martine gets his Tony Award, and all of a sudden people are like, oh my God, Martine, I love you, Where he's like, hey, I'm the same person. I got this power, it's amazing, it's a gift from God. And also, what does it actually mean to be in community? You know what I mean? Like, that's something I'm deeply interested in, still investigating for myself, to show up for others and have people show up for you. There's a natural vulnerability in that as well. Something that I personally have continued to struggle and have my own journey with myself. But I think that's what I was thinking about, is like this boy who in so many ways is in bondage, as a family that was born into bondage, and then has the power to open doors for himself, and that's also a burden.
Yes.
You know what I mean? To be almost model minority in that way.
Yes.
And no, I have to be perfect, because if I'm not, and I'm the peak of, you know, black excellence or whatever you want to say is going to bring down everybody else.
Right.
You know, the burden of having to be black and excellent. Like, you know what I mean? Like all of that.
Yeah,
So I think that's what I was percolating
yeah. And
with.
tokenized.
Yeah.
And also, yeah.
Totally.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So like, yeah, just like thinking about like what that actually means. And then I've also always just thought about like what would happen if Jesus actually did show back up.
Mm-hmm.
Like what would that actually be? Like, you know what I mean? Like for real. Like I have no idea. Like, you know.
Me either.
So I think that was some of what I was just thinking about. Just like Jesus walking down the street. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know, like some of that. Anything you want to add, Kat?
Yeah.
I love that.
I keep thinking about, in terms of community, in a reading we can't really do it, but the birthday party where they're rapping for him and dancing for him, just sort of recognizing him. And then there's another scene where there's a dance-off around him. And I keep thinking about how we in this culture are, even if we talk about community, we are placed in competition with other people. And I am a person, I mean, I'm the least, my friends will tell you, I'm the least competitive person you know. Like if somebody wants something more than I want it, y'all can have it. So when we finally stage that dance off, what are the subtle ways that we can talk about competition in there? Even Lucy talks about the competition between he and JC. So there's some, and Martin, even Martine. So there's something about the way that we lose community while we're trying to make community that is really interesting to me to mind in this play.
Lucy's bargain is framed as, I'll get into heaven if you become saintly, right? And so is Lucy seeking redemption, revenge, or something else? And what ethical territory does that open?
I think the ethical territory, this is the first time he put in the play that God was imperfect. God said, I created you in my image, and you're all imperfect because I'm imperfect. And that singed the hair in my nostrils. I love it because it is an incredible locus for conversation about how we are made and what we are made and where we are going. I think that Lucy thinks he wants redemption, but what it seems like he really wants is to be God, which reminds me of our current political situation. So, you know, I'm not writing the play. These are the things that I believe about your play.
What was the process? How long did it take for you to get to your final product? My second question is, you were saying that your personal identity definitely influenced you in writing it. How was it hard to separate you from Martine and the emotional boundaries in that? If you can speak on that.
Yeah.
Great question.
Yeah, awesome question. The first part of it, I'll say, like the draft we had 2 years ago, it was 9 actors. Yeah, and it was like it took place in a barber shop because Martine was also a barber. So it was like him, he would cut hair, men and women. He would also like do surgery. Like he was just like a young man who had like all these jobs. So we had like, it was first like the barbershop boys, and then it was like the beauty shop girls, but they were always like his protective, like guardian angels in some way. And I think for me, that version was way more of sort of like a biography play, if that makes sense, It was very much like, hey, you don't know this guy, he was amazing, now you do know him, And for me, in taking a step back and thinking about the questions I wanted the audience to leave with, I was like, oh, I actually need to like pare this down and figure out what the core of the play is. And I think that's why the title used to be Son of an Unknown Father, because that's what it says on Martine's birth certificate. But it became plural sons because of Lucy. Like these two men who are trying to reconnect with their fathers, who like need each other to do that. In terms of like my personal background, hard to separate. Could you speak to that? I mean, it's interesting because I'm also like an actor inside of it, right? So there's something of bringing myself to it on the page, And there's another thing when I'm asked to like embody the language that also came from me. You know what I mean?
As a playwright actor, what are some of the like challenges that you face of writing and then putting yourself in your work? Because that's something that some of us Conch Shell members are working through or we're dealing with. We're actors and also writers.
I would say the biggest challenge is I always feel like the acting is like the last priority. You know, like at some point Kevin's like, hey, you know you gotta do this. You know, but the gift of being in my own, writing my own plays, my own work, is I can feel from the inside the bumps in the road. You know, like even today in our small rehearsal before tonight's reading, I was doing edits and cuts. Because there's something about just like being next to the other actors, you can sort of feel like, I can do less. We don't need that, you know? And I think even tonight during today's reading, I felt that where I was like, I'm sitting there with my book and I'm like, if I had a pencil right now, cut. So I think for me, I haven't quite found that perfect balance of I can like be the writer and then be the actor at the same time. You know, like Christin and I, we collaborated on a multilingual Hamlet. In our last workshop in January at the Folger Theater, our director, Lori Woolery, was like, I need you to just act. You know, because I was playing Hamlet and I'm like, oh, well, you know, if you move this soliloquy, and like, you know what I mean? And she's like, she was really, like she made me change my seat, like all of that, just to like keep me in that brain, because I felt like that's what the project needed in that way. So I would say it's still a work in process, but I think I can only do it in rooms where I know my collaborators have my back.
I was gonna say,
Yeah. Like that's the thing, like it's really important for me to have those people in the room, like a Kristen, like a Kevin, a Tracy.
like, okay, we got this, go over there.
Yeah, that know that like, okay, it's a process, and when it's time for you to like, you know, step on the gas or whatever, you can do that.
Curious about the healed, the people who are seeking healing in this, and the need that you saw in them, the opinions that were sort of said about them, especially the mother. I kind of didn't expect her to have that reaction to warn you against, warn this character against those seeking healing. And as you were writing this, did your opinion develop or change about those folks?
Yeah, thank you for that. I would say previous drafts, all of the remarks from the townspeople, the community, were positive, right? And this was the first time I played with, there were probably people at that time, particularly people who might be Spaniard, for example, who probably looked at Martine as a freak, an anomaly, a devil, all these negative things, right? So playing with the way that this is maybe a next draft thing, Martine is trying to win them over. You know, like what it does for him, how he's seduced by the attention, the love, something that he's never gotten before, the power that he now has in that way. And I think like finding a moral gray for Martine as well is something I'm interested in. Like we have that one moment where even Lucy is like, whoa, like, you know, he's getting a little dark there. But I think I'm very intrigued by, I think about, this is kind of tangential, but I think it relates. DC Comics asked Michael B. Jordan to play Superman. And he said, I'll do it if you actually consider a world in which we have a black Superman and how people would react to that. Like in the movie, right? Like the most powerful being in the world is a black man. And I was thinking about that in relation to Martine. Of like, what is it to have a black Jesus walk around who has this godly power that no one can explain, right? There are some people who would probably want to kill him. And that's not in my play right now, but I think that's something I'm trying to investigate. You know what I mean? What it is for this black man to be all-powerful is a threat to a lot of people.
And that's a great scene with the mother, because what if that's what she's afraid of?
Yeah.
Thank you for writing this wonderful story, and thank you for directing, and thank you to the actors who were here tonight. You know, like, and this is wonderful. Thank you.